So it's the governor versus the state superintendent. What's that all about? And Edmondson versus Stitt. And David Boren shows up endorsing Edmondson. Will it matter? Coming up next, Mitchell Talks with Grant Herms and Aaron Brobeck. Well, it's Ladies' Day and night out at the Capitol. Mr. Herms, Mr. Brobeck. I'm talking about the governor versus the superintendent of public instruction. Nothing like a good old fight just before a general election within a party.
This was a pretty remarkable one. Dana Herneke did a story, sat down with Joy Hoffmeister. The story that she did basically is she wanted to find out how many of the schools had turned in information the governor had requested by executive order to find out what their finances are to determine which schools could potentially be shut down in order to save money, or consolidated, I should say.
The C word.
Consolidated in order to save money. And
third rail of government, right?
Yep.
It has been lately. Yeah.
And Joy Hoffmeister's response was,
well, it's a deeply flawed executive order. It's not something that I think is appropriate anyway. Anytime you set some kind of artificial bar, it fails to take into account what is important for the individual local school district that is trying to meet the needs of their students. You know, this should be about outcomes for students, and that's where we're going to keep our focus.
now that's pretty telling.
I mean, like, for her to do this now just shows how little power the governor has left. And as she's a lame duck, obviously, but especially within her own party. And it's twofold, too, because Hoffmeister doesn't want to, she says she does want to do this, doesn't want to do this before an election, but to rebuff the governor this way is pretty strong.
And it wasn't just a polite little, yes, we're still working on it. It's a, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and I'm not going to do what you say, you're not my real mom. And I was just like, my gosh.
And this thing, it was like, you're not my mommy. And then like they kicked the door open and left the room.
Yeah.
The lawyer for the State Department of Education was like, she doesn't have the authority to do this as the governor. I'm like, holy crap.
Right, and the governor's response was basically, instead of what you would expect from a governor to say, look, I'm the governor, you do it. Her response was, okay, we'll look into it.
Right, but
And
what
she
was her,
walked
what's
away.
her approval rating right now?
Almost zero.
Yeah,
19 was the
19%?
last number,
So
on
like,
the way down.
She doesn't have any political capital left. She can't borrow any from anybody anymore. I mean, she's the reason Todd Lamb didn't make it past the primaries, so she's got nothing left. And I think Hoffmeister and the rest of her staff know that.
And how many candidates sought her endorsement?
Zero.
Did she
Nobody.
endorse anybody?
No, I don't think they
she
wanted
didn't.
it.
I'm not so sure that Republicans would have rather had Barack Obama in endorsing him than the governor. I mean, when you start talking about these numbers, and I'm being serious here, I mean, she's toxic in terms of these candidates. And which my question is, you think this situation was hyped because it helps Ms. Hoffmeister in the general election to distance herself from the governor?
I think so. I think in a way, I mean, it can't hurt her, really. But I think she was also honest in not wanting to do this consolidation.
Yeah, no, she genuinely wants to keep, it seems like she wants to keep the 500 plus school districts that we have in place. Her statement was pretty clear. What she told Dana Herneke was that we need to keep our eye on the ball, in this case being more money for school districts, more money for teachers.
We have a teacher shortage crisis. There's not time for moving our eye off the ball, and any kind of artificial bar that's been set where decisions are made at the executive branch or at 23rd and Lincoln here at the Capitol are not necessarily going to be the best for students. There's no time for politics. This is about what's best for kids.
So that's pretty clear where she wants to go in terms of consolidation.
We should also be clear, too, that I think whether this was the governor's last term or her first term, the executive order wasn't worded very well. So from a legal standpoint, if you look at this, you know, they don't define what instructional education is. They want to have these districts with 60% instructional education. There's no definition for that. There's no guideline for that from either the AG's office nor the governor's office. So I think any attorney, no matter where the governor sits, whether she's really well liked or not, I think they'd have a trouble with this executive order anyway.
Right, 60% of spending is what
spending,
you're talking
yes,
about.
sorry,
So 60 cents on every dollar that goes to the school has to go towards instruction. But you're right. What is instruction? Does that include gym class? Does that include learning how to play dodgeball? Does that include duck, duck, goose? What exactly does that include? And that wasn't really clearly defined. But Hoffmeister isn't using that as an excuse.
No.
She's saying simply, we're not going to do it.
No, I'm just saying there are probably problems on this from all other ends here, including the writing of this thing. But obviously, right now in the situation we're in, it's the governor and where she stands, and that she's on her way out.
And in a case like this, too, you've got, it's an executive order, so it's law of the land now, but there's really no penalty if
Right.
somebody doesn't follow through.
Right.
So what's my incentive to follow through?
There isn't any. That's why she did it. Yeah.
But it's interesting watching, just given her lengthy political career, how little political clout she has. There was an instance this past session where she went on the floor to try to change some votes, and nobody changed, nobody moved. It was kind of,
It was her Spartacus moment.
yeah.
It was.
Another fail. Let me ask you this. Did she just take away a potential issue against her general election opponent? John Cox just lose a point that he could have used in the campaign? The Democrat nominee for a super.
Right. I think they were hoping that arrow was going to be in their quiver, and it's not now. I don't think he lost one that was there already. They were just hoping to be able to add that to their slew of things they're going to use as attacks.
I think it does hurt him, though. I mean, Joy Hoffmeister came across very, very strong with this. And like we talked about before, people in Oklahoma are in favor of consolidation as long as it's not in my district.
Shout out this week to Catherine Sweeney. I don't know if you guys saw her story about school finance. If you've been watching Washington and you're losing sleep, all you got to do is read about the school funding formula. It'll put you right down. A year and a half ago, I did a Mitchell Talks video on school funding. I was talking this week. I said, "Is that video still accurate?" He said, "Yeah, it's accurate. It's unbelievable. It never changes." So we're talking about school consolidation. Here's a name from the past. Odelia Dank, 20 years ago, tried to approach this. I mean, she was excoriated. God bless her soul. And her husband, after them, they tried to do something about school consolidation. Do we have too many districts? I think on the surface of it, nobody in the education establishment will say yes on public. When you go back behind the scenes, they'll go, yeah, we got to do something long term.
Right.
Agree?
Right.
But there really hasn't been a comprehensive study either to figure out, okay, we've got 507, I believe it is, right? We've got 500 and some change school districts. How many do we need to cut out? And how many do we need to consolidate? And how exactly would this work? It's just people are kind of throwing out random numbers. Let's do it county by county, or let's split it up Tulsa, Oklahoma. It doesn't work. We need some type of comprehensive study to figure out where we're going.
We need an anonymous op-ed by educators.
That's exactly what
It's
we
an
need.
anonymous op-ed to tell us what to do. Because I'm telling you, I talk to these people, okay, and they tell me, yeah, we have to do something, but I'm not going to be the first one over that hill.
Well, and in the end, it's politics. They might want this, they might think it's good policy, but it's bad politics to talk about consolidating school districts because everybody wants local control. And so I think Cox might have wanted this as a thing against Hoffmeister because he'd be willing to talk about it, but most people just don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, people don't want to jump in. I don't see anybody holding back on issues. Do you guys?
No.
I mean,
No.
all issues forward now. I mean, everybody's going forward on this. It also takes us to what happened this week with former President Boren, former Senator Boren, one of the most influential Democrats in the state, early endorses Drew Edmondson, and a lot of it has to do with education. I get this trend, education, maybe not medical marijuana, maybe not school consolidation per se, but it's going to be a big issue in this race. And then I've got the question that I posed last week to the guys on Your Vote Counts. Who's more in touch with where the leadership is in the GOP, Kevin Stitt or Drew Edmondson when it comes to education issues?
In the GOP, I would say Drew Edmondson. Stitt just probably doesn't have, I don't know this for sure, but my guess, given the campaign he ran in the primary and in the runoff, Stitt just doesn't have the same kind of relationship that Edmondson or somebody like Edmondson would have with the people who are up at the Capitol right now. The people at the Capitol might like Stitt, they might like his politics, but I don't think he's got the institutional knowledge of the place.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before too. Edmondson is definitely going to try to ride that school bus all the way to the Capitol. And I don't really know as Stitt has much of a plan just yet. You mentioned David Boren's endorsement this week of Drew Edmondson. It was a pretty firm endorsement.
I believe that this election for governor is one of the most important elections in the history of our state. Our future is at risk in our state. We must make the right choice to turn things around. That's why I am today endorsing Drew Edmondson for governor. I urge all Oklahomans, regardless of party, to support Drew and to bring desperately needed change to our state.
But it's really not much of a surprise. He's a political heavyweight. Everybody knows him. He's a Democrat, no surprise there. Is it going to carry any weight, do you think? Is that going to sway any voters? Is anybody who is currently not voting for Drew Edmondson going to say, well, David Boren endorsed him, he's got my vote?
Remember what happened a couple of years ago? David Boren, he led the way on that 1 penny teacher tax. Okay, that went down miserably.
The Boren tax, yep.
You've got to go all the way back to when I was a kid. That's before electricity, when this guy was emerging on the scene. By the way, he was a backbench House member, okay, who came from the back of the pack and became the governor with that broom, okay, that sweeping the state clean. It was like a scene from, what's that Coen Brothers movie about the Depression? Oh, brother, where art thou?
Yep.
Okay, you sweep the state clean. He rode that to the governorship, and then he went to United States Senate forever, and then the story at the University of Oklahoma. There are generations of people that are voters in the state who don't know who David Boren is, right? But there are tons of base Democrats that do. So what I see, the answer to your question, to be like I'm a Supreme Court nominee, I'll evade it a little bit. I will just say this. It ties up the base. And certainly progressive Republicans are looking at it thinking, all right, this guy's for it.
I'm going to disagree with you on that. I think that Boren might actually hurt Edmondson. Edmondson is already a centrist Democrat. The Democrats and the Democratic progressive base in this state voted for Bernie Sanders. Neither Boren nor Edmondson are Sanders Democrats. And I think Boren's endorsement might hurt him with those far left progressives that they'll need to go vote at the polls because those people don't generally vote. And so we'll see if Edmondson has to try to reach out to the left while staying firmly in the center here to try to grab the center right too. We'll see if that happens, or if he's just going to say, screw it. I'm going to ignore the left like most establishment Democrats have done. But that didn't work out too well on the national stage. And I think he's going to need those people to turn out to vote to beat Stitt.
Do you think Boren, though, is going to draw some of the younger voters who are college students or recent college students who may have been under his presidency?
Maybe, but I don't think those same people have, their affinity for Boren doesn't translate into this. They think of him as the grandfather who was there while I was at OU, not like the political powerhouse that we know him as.
But wouldn't that lead the more politically astute recent college graduate to say, hey, this guy's like my grandfather, and he says this is a good person, he must be a good person?
If that, but I think there are enough progressive Democrats in the state who are fed up with how the establishment in this state has run in the Democratic Party that they'll almost take a step back from that, the recoil from David Boren.
And I think that's what this whole campaign is going to be about. It's going to be about the old, seasoned politician versus the guy who comes in saying, I'm the new buck, I'm the guy who has no political experience, and I'm here to clean out the swamp.
So, do people want Bernie Sanders' endorsement or not in Oklahoma? Is he joining Mary Fallon on the sidelines? Nobody wants to see him on the.
I mean, nationally, he's been completely quiet lately, so I don't know what's happening there. But you've seen recent articles with that end of the National Democratic Party campaigning in states like Missouri and in Kansas. They haven't made it here yet. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody like Ocasio Cortez from Brooklyn made a trip here. She's been campaigning with Sanders as well in some of these deeper red states. So maybe we get a little closer. The Democratic Party here has trouble with their far left wing, and they need some help, and they need some bona fides for Edmondson, who most of those people see as an establishment corporate-backed Democrat.
So here's your question whenever you get with Drew next time. Do you want Bernie Sanders in here?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's probably a question that they'll be thinking, I'm not really sure. It's almost like when you get with a GOP person right now, go, who do you agree with more on education, Drew Edmondson, or who agrees most with you, Drew Edmondson or Kevin Stitt? It's an uncomfortable question.
And when you're talking about endorsements too, I mean, that's always a tough one, because if you've got somebody from within your party endorsing you, is that really going to switch any votes around? I talked with Kevin Stitt about the Boren thing. He didn't seem impressed.
I'm sure that those guys are going to line up. Those guys have been running our state for decades and decades, and people are tired of the political elites. So I'm not surprised that he's aligning himself with the political elites in our state.
I think those inside the party endorsements matter more for solidifying votes and making sure people turn out in your party than it is changing their minds. You're not, in this political climate, in this state, you're not going to change a lot of hearts and minds to switch parties. You're just not.
Can you think of anybody that either side could get an endorsement from that would change votes on the other side? Is there anybody with that much political power that could walk in and say, right now I'm backing Drew Edmondson, but wait a second, Kevin Stitt just brought bang in, I'm changing my vote, or vice versa?
I mean, the only person that I could think of that would switch a Democrat to vote Republican would be President Obama. If he backed Kevin Stitt, I think you'd see a lot of people jump ship there. And I think the same goes for President Trump. I think that endorsement, obviously he's going to go for Stitt. He already did.
Right.
But if he come on in support of Edmondson, I think that would have given people pause on the right. But I think it has to be those extremes to get people to cross the aisle.
What if you see, I guess what I was getting at, what if you see a Bill Clinton come in and support Drew Edmondson? Would that maybe change some of the older Republicans over? Because the economic times were pretty strong.
That's true. That's true.
Under Clinton's administration.
Maybe, but Clinton again has problems with the far left right now, given his record with the Me Too camp and all of that. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that could pull some people over, but I don't know.
What happens to those middle-of-the-road Republicans if you bring in President Obama, President Clinton, or Bernie Sanders, other than the fact that we'll have so much fun if they do come to town, because we can resuscitate our Bernie Sanders impression, and mine's not bad. Okay?
And our Clinton.
Yeah.
You do a good Clinton.
I do old Clinton and new Clinton. Not very good on the Obama. But if we start to see those sorts of people come into the state, then it signals that nationally this is a really huge campaign, because the D's need to take some state houses back, right? So this is an opportunity. I think, doesn't Politico and Real Clear Politics know some of those folks have it leaning Republican now from SAFE?
Yeah, the Cook Political Report has Oklahoma leaning. It's still, pretty securely in the hands of Republicans, but it has inched leftward in that scale. 538 had the same thing, especially after the special elections. Now their model is changing a little bit because the special elections have not been great predictors for the generals and the primaries. But in some eyes, Oklahoma is starting to at least open that left door.
And I don't think anybody's under the illusion that Oklahoma is going to be a Democrat
No.
state anytime soon. But again, if you can win a high seat like the governor's seat, that might energize the Democrats nationally to go out and vote for a Democratic president.
Okay, so speaking of energizing Democrats, can we get to Edmondson's plan here?
Yeah, the funding plan, right?
Yeah, the funding plan. It's his education funding plan. Aaron, Craig, you were there, so correct me if I'm wrong. It's 7% GPT.
Yep.
It's 50 cents for tobacco, and they want to end the capital gains tax.
Right. And he kind of addressed that in terms of the way that he would see this thing going down.
The combination of those tax measures would bring in the $300 million that were missing after the Step Up program was rejected by the Oklahoma legislature. It is, in many estimations, a modest plan. It will not affect the income tax rates of any Oklahomans unless they deduct capital gains. But it will not affect the income tax rate itself, nor will it raise sales tax on any items except cigarettes. So if you should happen to see something different in a TV ad, keep in mind that you heard it here. That's my plan. It's not something else. That's it.
Now, I don't necessarily think that it's going to go down the way that he hopes that it's going to go down, only because we've seen these things go before the legislature before, and they failed miserably.
I had deja vu. I was watching the press conference, and I was like, this is exactly, or as close as exact as we're going to get to what the Democrats trotted out during the Step Up plan.
Yeah, but this has been tested.
Of course it has.
Okay, I mean, Celinda Lake, I think, is his pollster, always has been, and he tested this. And you know what that means? That means if he's rolling this out, people are for it, would be my guess.
Democrats liked it when they first brought it out. Their voters liked it when they first brought it out. But to get Republicans in the legislature to go on board with this after they already said no, how is that going to work?
Let's look at each one. I mean, the 7% gross production tax, that would require a 50% majority. So that one is attainable. The 50-cent tobacco tax, not attainable. That's a 75. No. That's because that's a new tax. When you're changing existing taxes, you need a simple majority. When you're making a new tax, it's got to be 75%. Yeah. And that 75% is almost unattainable. We had one senator who mentioned to me one time during this whole thing, before they finally reached the 75%, he says to me, even God couldn't keep 75% of his angels. he's right. That's a lot.
Yeah,
that's
that's
a
a-
huge threshold to try to meet. So whether Edmondson can bring in that kind of leadership, I don't see that happening. And same with capital gains. That's more of a change. So that's a 50%.
Yeah.
That's a possibility, but I don't see it with a still Republican.
And then he
controlled
talked
House
about
and Senate.
adding a special session too, or not a special session, a state question
Right.
for this if it
He-
doesn't
He
pass.
said if gross production doesn't make it up to 7% in the legislature, he'll put it up to a vote of the people, which with a vote of the people, there's a good possibility I think it may pass at 7%.
Wow. He's rolling it out there because it's polling good.
That poll's great.
You may be, I'm not talking about people's principle. I'm just saying in a campaign like this, you don't roll something out there if you think 2/3 of the folks hate this thing, right?
But he's rolling it out there because everybody's talking education right now. That was his focus during his press conferences. This money's going towards education. I want $300 million more on top of the $400 million that have already been passed by the legislature.
We are tired of 4-day school weeks in 1/5 of our school districts. We're tired of 30% of our school districts not offering a foreign language when it remains a requirement for admission to many of our colleges and universities. And we are tired of overcrowded classrooms and too few teachers. We have got to do better if we're going to grow as a state. That's what we're here. That's what the teachers were telling me, and that's what industrial recruiters were telling me as well.
And so that's the direction that he's going again, riding the school bus all the way to the Capitol.
So I had two thoughts as I'm listening to this thing. The first is that what are you doing starting your campaign really in earnest here, talking about taxes, talking about raising taxes? That is, like if we talk
Political
about
suicide?
Yeah, it's political suicide.
Especially at a time when the Treasury Department is saying that we're seeing more money than we expected rolling in because of changes the legislature's already made.
Yeah, it was after
Before-
we just passed the highest tax increase in
Right.
state history.
And Stitt addressed that too. He said, we don't even know exactly how much we're making in yet. We do know it's a lot more than we've had in previous years. How about we wait and see before we start talking more taxes?
We've got $1 billion more in revenue. And really the real answer is we have got to run government effectively and efficiently. So we've got $1 billion more. That's even before these tax increases are going into effect. So my opponent, his first inclination is always to raise taxes on hardworking Oklahomans. We've got to get control of the $1 billion first and foremost.
On the flip side of what Edmondson is saying here, it does drive home the education point. It says he's committed, he says Democrat, that he's committed about funding education at the levels they want to see it funded at. And it's a gamble. It is I think a big gamble to start out this way, and maybe they're hoping that that kind of thing dies down, but I think this is going to haunt him in debates and in attack ads. It already is.
And he won't even articulate exactly how much he's looking for. I asked him for an exact amount.
We need all that we can get. It is a very serious problem.
Now that's not the right answer. That's not the thing you want to say. As much as we can get, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
To a taxpayer that says, "Whoa, wait a second. You want to take as much as you can get from me?"
And a taxpayer in this state, which is
Right.
pretty tax averse. So
Right.
I don't know
if it was a smart plan.
I don't know. We'll see.
All right, last question, and we got to get out of here. Is this the issue for the rest of the campaign?
Education? No.
No.
Not the only issue.
What will be next? I mean, this one will play out, right?
Pot.
I think marijuana. I think that's the way things are looking. Some of the stories that I've been working on that hopefully will come out soon. We bungled that thing, and it's going to play a role in getting people to vote.
Yep, I agree. People want it passed the way that they voted for it. And you're right, we bungled it bad. And
So
I don't think we even know how bad yet.
Is that a tease? We're going back to Doobies next week, brothers?
Probably.
Okay. Hey, thanks for joining us. See this again at news9.com/yourvotecounts. For Aaron Brilbeck, for Grant Herms, I'm Scott Mitchell. Thanks for watching.